Hello friends. I really loved preparing to preach on Daniel 7 last week, but one of the hardest things was there was so much to leave out, so much in that chapter. So I was going to take this opportunity just to say something that I had to skip, which is why all the strange beasts in Daniel 7. He has this dream of the future, and these rulers and these empires that are to come, they're pictured as beasts, strange animals. 4 great beasts, each different from the other, came up out of the sea, Daniel 7 verse 3. Now there's been a deep connection between humans and animals right from the very moment that we were created. Genesis 1:26 says this: "Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So here, the very reason that we're created was to rule over the animals in a manner resembling God's rule, his very good, kind, caring rule. But rather than ruling over the animals for their benefit, very often as humanity, we have allowed animal-like instincts to overcome us. We were supposed to exercise self-control over our appetites, over our desires, bringing them under the rule of God's word, so that we might rule creation for creation's benefit. But too often we've allowed our appetites and our desires to control us, and we've plundered creation for our own benefit. And this leads to rulers of empires like the ones that Daniel foresees, whose rule is beast-like. Earthly rulers, to a greater or lesser extent, are driven by their own appetites and desires, rather than ruling a rule that is shaped by the task for which God made us. And in fact, each of us, to a greater or lesser extent, will rule in a beast-like way, driven by our own appetites and desires in whatever sphere of influence we have any power over. You know, how many times have I been angry with my children simply because they got in the way of my desire for comfort, for an easy life? And this is animal-like, it's beast-like rule, because it's all about me and what I want and what I need, rather than the kind of rule that God has created me to have over my children. He created me to love them and to nurture them and to discipline them, but for their own benefit, not just to discipline them because they're annoying me. There's hope, though, for those who have exercised their authority in a beastly way. And the first glimmer of hope is seen in what happens to Nebuchadnezzar. So he's the first beast that comes out of the sea, the lion with the wings of an eagle. 7 verse 4 says this: "I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it." So the beast of Nebuchadnezzar, it becomes less beast-like, it becomes more human. How does that happen? Well, God humbles Nebuchadnezzar so that Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges God's rule and then shapes his own rule around who God is. And you can read all about that if you go back to chapter 4 of Daniel. So God can humble us. He can remind us of his bigness and our smallness, and lead us into exercising power in a way which more closely matches what he intended. But the real hope comes in the one who will come and rule like a proper human being, in the way that humans were always supposed to rule, properly in the image of God. No one else has ever exercised power in a way that is more self-giving. No one else has ever been willing to put aside their own appetites and desires for the sake of serving others to such an extent as the one who was like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. In Daniel chapter 7 and verse 13, Jesus, he is the perfect human, fully human, not at all beast-like in this chapter, ruling for the benefit of us and all creation. And he exercises his rule. In exercising his rule, he gave himself for me, so that in him my beast-like tendencies and actions might be forgiven and transformed. In the words of the once ever so beastly but then humbled Nebuchadnezzar. He said, "How great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an eternal kingdom. His dominion endures from generation to generation." Thanks. Bye.